In this lesson, we'll learn how we can start to work with procedural textures inside of Softimage. Okay, so up until this point, we've been working with textures that are essentially just bump maps or bitmaps. So these are actual JPEG files that can be incorporated onto our meshes. However, Softimage actually comes with a number of textures that are procedural, and essentially just meaning that these are some textures that are built and controlled directly inside of Softimage. So to take a look at this, we'll look at how we can start to incorporate basic gradient onto some of our meshes. Now first, before I do that, I'll come in and just very quickly assign a couple of materials to things like this engine cover, as well as this nose area. So I'll very quickly maybe just drop in a Fong. And let's come in and I'll set this to the color wheel just because I find this a little bit faster and easier to work with. So I can maybe start with a kind of a dark green color. And I might even come in and maybe just sample a color off of this texture and give myself kind of a nice starting point here for the color that I want to choose. There we are, something like that should work. Now, if I need to, I could always come in and switch this from an RGB color slider to maybe an HSV or a hue, lightness, and saturation, whichever one works best. And now we can come in and start to adjust things like the saturation or how dark that is. All right, there we are. So that should work for me. And for this one, maybe come in and give it something a little bit different. Again, maybe a Fong. But this time, I'll maybe give it sort of a yellowish orange color. There we are. So again, just something very, very simple. Now, let's come in and actually give a material to these fan blades. So again, we could use this process of assigning and then use the assign material to assign that to different multiple fan blades. Or an easier method, again, might just be to use our material manager and just approach it from this way. So let's go in and we'll start by creating a Fong. So here's our Fong. Once again, come in and rename this. We can call this something like fan blade material. There we are. So let's double click on this. And for our color information, let's plug in a color map. So let's go in and instead of plugging in an image, which is what we did previously, let's scroll down and use a gradient, which these are all of Softimage's pre-built procedural textures. So here's our gradient. And you can see now our gradient has been plugged in to our diffuse. Now, just like before, if we were to come in and try to render this out, you should see that our gradient does not show up because this gradient, just like with our regular textures, we still need to make sure that we have some kind of a UV layout on these objects. Otherwise, the texture does not know how it's supposed to be applied to these objects. So just to make this a little bit easier, I'll go into my Scene Explorer and just grab my fan blades here. So I'll grab the top one, Shift select the bottom one, so we can grab all of these in between. Now, previously we've looked at how we can go in and use a texture projection, but we can also use this on multiple objects. So with all of these selected, I'll choose something like a planar XY. There we are. Now it actually is a little bit difficult to see, so what I might do is, in my visibility options, just turn off my 3D geometry. There we are. So looking at that, you can see our texture, or our texture projections here, look like they align properly, so it's projecting that texture sort of from the front of these fan blades, which is what I want. Okay, so now, if I were to press and hold the Q key on my keyboard and render this out, again, you can see that nothing is happening. And the reason for that is because even though I have set up my UV projection methods, I still haven't actually assigned this material to my actual fan blades here. So once again, just to make this a little bit easier to select, I can go into my Scene Explorer, grab my fan blade, grab all of those, and with all of those selected, just take my fan blade material, click and drag that out into my workspace. And now, once we render this out, we should start to see a proper effect. There we are, very nice. Now, here's something to keep in mind. When it comes to working with these procedural textures, even though these may show up just fine here within the render, these procedural textures will never show up in the actual viewport itself. So something to keep in mind, that even though this has been assigned properly, you won't ever see these within your actual 3D viewport. So we'll come in and just quickly draw out a render region, just so we can actually see this as we start to work. So essentially we have these three different color swatches, or these multiple different color swatches. So what I can do is come in, just grab these, select the color swatches that I don't want, and just press delete to remove those. And really what I'm trying to do is just come in and very quickly grab these and try to move these around. So what I might do is actually take this and temporarily disable my render region, because sometimes that can start to slow things down. So we can come in and grab some of these different color swatches now. So at the base of our fan blades here, let's just see what we have. So again, click and draw my render region. Now if I need to get back, I should be able to just use my navigation buttons up here to get back to where I was previously. So at the bottom, so kind of down toward the base here, let's go in and switch this to more of a dark gray. So trying to simulate kind of some dirt and grime that we would start to see probably around here, and some accumulation of that. So see what we have here. So overall doesn't look that much different. So we might start to pull that up a little bit more. There we are. And you can see where gradually we're starting to now introduce a little bit more of that dark color, that dark gray color at the base here. Now up here toward the middle, I'll go ahead and maybe set this to a medium gray. Now if I have a little trouble actually picking out a true gray, what I might be able to do, this is a little bit easier method, is to actually press and hold the Control key on your keyboard and then click and drag along these sliders. You notice if I press and hold the Control key, all these three sliders stay locked, which means it's going to be at a grayscale value. There we are. So that gives us now sort of a medium gray. And now for this outer part, I'll switch this again to a little bit darker gray, so that way we get a little bit more accumulation of some of this dirt and grime up here as well. And we can start to take that slider and begin sliding some of that color gradation up a little bit higher. There we are. And then once we find our proper value, you can start to see where this really quickly starts to come together. So now, again, if I were to press and hold the Q key on my keyboard, draw out my render region, we should now start to see these really nice subtle little gradation effects. So we start to get something that kind of radiates here from the bottom, sort of simulating some of this dirt and grime that we might start to get here, and then gradually sort of tapering out to a nice kind of clean metal before we get into something that is maybe a little bit more dirty on the outside as well. Now, maybe along this front nose area, maybe we might want to do something very similar, because you can see it does look sort of strange with this really nice clean nose here, but these kind of dirty fan blades. So that should be pretty easy to do. We can just grab this, and let's go to Get Property, Texture Projection, and we can really project this from just about any direction that we want. In my case, I'll project this straight down, so do something like a YZ projection. There we are, and once again, Control 7 on my keyboard. Go into my actual material that we want to use for this nose here. Might come in and rename that, so nose material. There we are. And once again, we can just double click on the actual node itself. We'll go to color, back down to gradient. There we are. And once again, might need to come in and use our render region to actually see what we have here. So give this just a moment. You can see now with this texture being projected down from the top, how we get sort of this radiant look here. So just like what we did earlier, I'll grab some of these different color swatches, grab the ones that I don't want, and just delete these out. So typically, if you start to find that your color gradation is a little bit sharper than what you might want, a lot of times you can fix that by just taking your different colors and starting to remove some of these different gradient areas that you may not want. Starting to just remove a lot of those unnecessary colors, and hopefully in the process give you something that is a little bit softer in your transitions. So once again, we can come up here and try to grab sort of a nice orange color. There we are. So now you can start to see where we transition from this orange color into maybe something that is a little dirtier. So if we want that transition to maybe start to happen a little bit more substantially in here, we should be able to come in and start to tighten up some of those gradients. Again, if I want that to be a little bit darker, maybe just switch that to a hue, lightness, and saturation. So that way we can start to darken this up a little bit more. There we are. Very nice. So now you can start to see where we get something that is quite a bit more natural compared to what we had before. There we go. Overall, that looks now much, much better. So just like what we did before, once we have all of our textures and everything in place, it's typically going to be a good idea to come in and take our different objects and just clear out our history or freeze our operators, so that way all of these different texture projections can be removed. So we can go in and grab all of our fan blades and grab this nose as well. Go ahead and freeze the operators, and you can see that will now again clear off all of our texture projections. And there we go. So that's a look at how we can start to incorporate some of these procedural texturing methods into our Softimage scenes.